Hi, this is Bill Boggs. Welcome to a truly beautiful Friday in New York City for a lot of reasons. One is it's a beautiful spring day. The other is on the front page of the New York Times, we see a substantial news story about the budget for New York City next year. Behind that budget is a substantial man. He is our guest on today's program. We're live with Mayor Edward Koch, so stay with us. Very good to have you with us. I can't recall in the 9 years I've been doing the show how many times Mr. Mayor has been here, 3 or 4 I think. Whenever I know he's coming, I truly look forward to it, as today, and today is no exception. Today he is a man with something really to be happy about, the budget projections for next year, 1985. He's also happy about this, a book at the top of the bestseller list, written defying all the rules for politicians. Let's have a nice welcome on a program that's going to feature calls from all of our 5 boroughs, an audience of people from all 5 boroughs. A nice welcome for our mayor, please, Edward Koch, if you will.
Hi, Bill.
Hi. Nice to see you. Welcome to the show.
Okay.
I always like to, if whenever possible, give a little bit of a hindsight or behind-the-scenes explanation as to sometimes how things happen. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was having dinner upstairs at Patsy's restaurant over on the west side, and I came down after a great dinner, and who was sitting there but
me?
His Honor, right? And I said, congratulations, it's nice to see you. And at that time, I said something relevant to the success of your book, which I would like to quote again. Several years ago, when the great artist Pablo Picasso died, there was a cartoon in the Washington Post, which I always remembered. And it pictured Picasso with his palette and his brushes under his arm, looking up. And there, sort of in the heavens in the cloud, we had Rembrandt, Van Gogh, Rodin, a few other artists. And all he said to them was, "Sorry, I broke a few of the rules." You have broken rules by writing this memoir. It is on top of the bestseller list. Let's begin today's show by talking about that. Everyone says the book is what? What do they say about your book?
Well, most people who have read the book find it very interesting.
It's entertaining.
It's entertaining, but it's also informative about government. And what shocks people is that it is a national bestseller. Some people believed after it was published that it might become popular in New York City, where people know the people who are mentioned. They never thought it would be popular outside of New York City, but it is. It's popular in LA and it's popular in Boston, and I'm delighted.
Well, the thing that has been, I think, aroused the greatest curiosity, obviously, is the fact that you've written a book which is forever. 300 years from now, hopefully, they'll be able to read Mayor, what was going on in New York City in the late 70s and 80s. And you talk about people who were close to you, and you reveal them, warts and all. A lot of the people you mention are insulted. A lot of the people feel, gee, why did he have to say that? Why did he make public something which was private? That's the controversial nature of the book, I think, for the people who are involved in it, not the reading public. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it's successful.
Shall I explain?
Yeah, tell us.
Let me tell you, I decided I would write a book because people don't have sufficient respect for government, and I think that while they like their individual congressmen and assembly people and council people, or on occasion even their mayors, if you ask them about the institution of government, they despise it. They think of government as the enemy too often. I wanted them to know that the mayor makes decisions that they would make if they were the mayor, and I brought them into the room where the decisions were made. And so, if you're writing a slice of history, which is what I perceive I have written, of a period in New York City's life that is extremely exciting, about 5 years in the coverage, then you have to tell it as it happened, as you can best recall it. What I have found so interesting is the comment of some reporters who said, well, why is it that you said things that were unflattering about some of your friends? Yeah. I said, would it be honest and history if I only said unflattering things about my opponents? It wasn't intended to be unflattering either of my opponents or of my friends. It was intended to record what happened. It's a slice of history.
How do you feel about the fact that some people are hurt by this? And because it's in print, they're hurt. They're not hurt if it maybe was a news story that you threw away 3 weeks ago, but the fact that it's in a book.
Well, let me say I'm sorry if there are people who are hurt by it. It wasn't done maliciously. It is important, if you are writing history, that you recount it as it occurred. I don't frankly think that anyone has been successful in disputing any of the things that happened there.
No. And you're not afraid that, one of the questions is, will Mayor Koch really be able to get people to work with him, work close to him? If he's
harder than ever before. They all want to be in my next book.
All right, fine. What I did was, in reading the book, I just took some things so we could get a feeling for some of the anecdotes and so forth, and I just marked them here with very primitive marks. Let's see what the first one up is. I'll start at the back of the book. Here's a quote from the book. I'll read this, and this tell us a story that surrounds it. It is said by Marty Kaplan, speechwriter, replies, "I think there is probably more speculation about the motives of Ed Koch than there is about any other persons in the world, including the Ayatollah." Why was that uttered and when?
Well, firstly, that's reported by somebody else who told me of it, and it was reported in Washington during the time that President Carter was president, and I was seeking to get him to fulfill his commitments to the city of New York. I believe there are people who say, well, why does Koch do the things that he does? Why isn't he more, they never use the word, but that's what they mean, more political? I am not political. If you believe by being political, you only do that which will help you to get reelected. I want to be reelected, but that's not why I do things. I do things, I believe, because they are the common sense approach. That's why, if you want to put it right on the table, that's why I'm popular. Because people know that if they were there doing the things that a mayor does and making decisions, 9 times out of 10, they would be doing what I'm doing.
What in your background, youth, childhood, college, Congress, gave you or taught you that quality?
I can't report that with any accuracy. I believe you are the sum of your experiences and of your mother and father's chromosomes. And I believe that your character, your personality are formed genetically, what your mother, what your father was, and the environment, what they built into you, and what others did. I came through a childhood that was in poverty, because everybody I knew was in poverty, only we didn't know it was poverty. We just assumed that everybody was that way and lived that way. When we had the Depression, my father and his brother could not separately afford their own apartments for their families, and their 2 families moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. My father, I think, had 2 children at that time, my brother and myself. My sister was yet to be born, and my uncle had 2 children at that time. So at the minimum, it was 8 of us sharing 1 2-bedroom apartment.
How many bathrooms?
1.
That's always the great part, first thing in the morning. Now, here's another excerpt from the book, something I found to be an interesting insight. Will you read it? Would you mind reading it?
I don't mind reading it.
Fine. Just this paragraph here. When I got to the Waldorf?
Fine. Okay. When I got to the Waldorf, I waited in the lobby at the side entrance on 50th Street. A member of the president's staff asked me to follow him into an elevator. With him were 2 people. What is strange about it is that no other president I have worked with would ever have done that. He would have entered the elevator alone and insisted that everyone else get out. I told a presidential staff aide, Richard Williamson, that this was a mark of a very special person and that the president should continue the practice.
No, we're talking about President Reagan at this time. Now, just elaborate on this a little bit.
I'll tell you what I said about...
Why did you include that in the book?
I want to tell you.
Yeah.
You know, I happen to disagree philosophically with President Reagan, and I've made that very clear on social issues, on international issues. I happen to like him personally, and I think that fundamentally he's a decent man with great integrity and great courage and a simplicity that I admire in a person, even though we're in disagreement. There are lots of people in public life who can't distinguish between the individual and that individual's philosophy. I can. And what I was remarking there was this simplicity, not simplistic, but the simplicity in this man's personality. Other presidents that I have been with, when you got to the elevator, you were not allowed on. you would meet them on the next floor. Maybe it was security, maybe it's just the nature of the way they perceive the office, or their supporters, or their guards, so to speak. But President Reagan said, "Come on in." And up we went. It was rather nice.
Interesting thing. Now here's something from early in the book, actually page 15 in the book Mayor. I'll read this, and it takes us back to you in 1952, when you're describing a little bit about your activities then, almost maybe laying the groundwork for the training with the way you're able to deal with people today. I had supported Stevenson in 1952 as a street speaker, or as they used to say, on a soapbox. And I did so again to an even greater extent in 1956. This is what Ed Koch would do in 1956. I would take my U.S. flag and walk around, speaking wherever I could find anyone who would listen. The State Democratic Committee provided American flags, which the law required for display by all speakers. It was very exciting. What do you remember about Ed Koch in 1950? You were walking around with the flag on a soapbox?
I can tell you a little
Tell us more about
there.
that.
I had my law office at 52 Wall Street, and Stevenson was running in 1956, and the big issue was ban the hydrogen bomb. That was his major issue at that time.
Not a bad issue.
We should have banned it.
That's correct.
Now, I remember going out at noon, at 12 o'clock, to the corner of Nassau and Wall, which gets hundreds of people. That's where the sub-treasury building is. And I stood on a chair. Actually, I took a chair in lieu of a soapbox. And I stood on the chair, and I collected about 300 people. And a cop came over, and he said, "You got to move along unless you have a permit." I said, "You're wrong, officer. You don't need a permit unless you're using a sound device." He said, "Never mind, young man. If you don't move along, I'm going to arrest you." So I said, "Look, officer, across the street, there is that person who is what we then called a holy roller. He was converting everybody religiously, and he was there every day." And I said, "Look, he's there every day. He collects large crowds. You never ask him for a permit." And the cop says to me, "He's different. He's a fanatic."
That's funny. Our format for the show is going to include excerpts from the book Mayor, conversations, questions from our audience, and questions from you viewers from all five boroughs. Let's go to our first question. Mike is fine just the way it is, sir. So you look like a politician yourself. Dressed in that sincere blue suit. What's your name?
My name's Ed Murphy. I'm chairman of Community Board 2 in Staten Island.
From Staten Island. Welcome to our program. Are you going to stay part of New York City, or are you going to secede?
That's problematical unless certain things occur.
What would you like to ask Mayor Koch?
Mr. Mayor, as chairman, I would like to just tell you that the community is quite upset with your proposal to put the 500 people in Seaview, the homeless. Now, you're aware that Seaview is a healthcare facility for 310 people, and they feel that taking 500 people from the city of New York and taking them out to Staten Island, like in a roundup, bedding them down, and they're free, and then they have access to leave whenever they feel, that it would interfere with the nature of the facility, since it has aged people, the community's trying to help them, building solariums, etc. And since it's not Russia, we're here in New York City.
You don't want them there.
I understand it. Let me give you what the background is, if I may. I understand the apprehension. Every single community in which we have placed homeless people has the same argument. And you know what they always say? We absolutely want to help the homeless, but not on our block. Find some other place. When I came in, we had only 3 places in which we placed homeless. We were spending for the homeless, the single individuals, $7 million, and for families that we kept in hotels, a total between the two groups of $14 million. Now, and at that time, we had only 5,000 people altogether, single and families, that we were providing for. Do you know what the number are now? We are now providing for 6,500 single individuals every night. We give them a bed. We are providing for 2,900 families. You multiply that by 4, because it's generally a mother, a woman with 3 children. And you know that our budget in fiscal 86, I copied down the numbers, will be for these 2 groups that we used to spend only $14 million, we're going to be spending $173 million. Wow. Now, there are different groups. One group says, you're doing too much. Another group says, you're not doing enough. You got to find an apartment for every person. It's ridiculous. With a vacancy rate of 2%, we can't find an apartment for everybody, but we must be sure that nobody sleeps on the streets. Now, in Staten Island today, there are about 16 out of the 6,500 homeless individuals who we have on Staten Island in any one evening. Is that fair? I don't think so. And so we're distributing the burden. It is a burden. And we don't do it in an arbitrary way. There is a building there that can accommodate 500 people. Unless we can come up with some alternative, and Tony Gator, the borough president, Nick Laporte, have suggested an alternative, which we're checking out, that we see if we can get the federal government to give us a Liberty ship, and that we then house people overnight in the Liberty ship. We're going to check it out. They've come up with some other suggestions. If they're doable, responsible, we'll do them. If they're not, we're going to use this facility.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. They actually could go on one of those cruises to nowhere. They could be cruising. Anyway, we have one phone call from Brooklyn. Let's get right to it before we take a commercial break. Hi, this is Bill Boggs with Mayor Ed Koch. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hi, welcome to the program. Your question right off the bat, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to say to Mayor Ed Koch that my name is Joe. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm not a very politically minded person. However, I have followed your career in the past few years, and I think that you should know that I've spoken in many circles and conversed about you, and you are just so fantastically human, the way you speak to the people, and the work you have done.
You better not give your last name, they'll throw rocks in your window.
No, and I also want to say that someone mentioned to me that it's because you're so fantastically human how you can speak to people on any issue. And I think that this really exudes just a fantastic, dynamic ability. And I just want you to know that, you know, I'm a young guy, and I just want you to know that you're greatly loved by a lot of
Thank
people.
you.
That's
appreciate
a nice, positive thought. I appreciate the call, Joe. And I think...
I certainly appreciate it.
Too. We'll be back and continue our program and talk with more excerpts from Mayor, more conversation with the Mayor right after this. You see, we'll take a phone call or two from Queens in this segment. And you just heard the music we'll be playing all throughout the show, remembering the one and only Count Basie on today's program. I want to read another excerpt from the book Mayor. This has to do with an early moment in your dealing with the unions. I ask you again to read.
Put my glasses on.
Page 110. This is...
Okay. I say, just a minute, fellas. Can I say something? There is no government by partnership or government by committee here. Let's make sure we all understand that I was elected, not you. We have a common goal here, and that is terrific, and we will be working together. You represent 300,000 people. I represent 7.5 million, of which your 300,000 are a part. And it's terrific when we are all on the same track, but sometimes we're not going to be. So we are not partners, and everybody should know that. You want me to tell you how that happened?
Yeah, and then you go on to say, it's the first time I can recall that it was laid out to them, the union leaders, that this mayor was not going to be their patsy.
Correct.
Let's give us the background on that.
Well, it was sometime, I think, in December of 1977, after I'd been elected. And I was asked to meet with union leaders, and they're all distinguished people. And I won't mention their names because I'll be leaving some out, and then they'll get upset. And we were then working on our going to Washington to get the federal legislation and doing other things to save the city of New York. And you've got to give credit to the unions, to the union leaders, to the business people in this town, and to the 7.5 million New Yorkers for the sacrifices they made and for our all working together. But it was clear to me that at this meeting, by virtue of what they said, that we are partners, and they were talking about government. And I wanted to make it very clear that we work together, but sometimes we're going to have differences. For example, we're going through collective bargaining now.
Right.
I sit on management's side because I'm the employer, in the sense that the mayor represents the city, as a president represents, or a chairman of a board represents a corporation. And the union leaders are on the other side, and then we negotiate in good faith. I think that that was not always the case in prior administrations. I believe that on occasion everybody sat on the same side of the table. And as a result of that, the city of New York was brought almost to the edge of bankruptcy in 1975 because of the enormous costs, labor costs, that had been built up over the years by prior administrations. And that's the thrust of that section.
Now, you have, during the course of your stewardship, made us tighten our belts. We don't have as many firemen. We don't have as many policemen. We have hospitals have been closed. We don't have as many workers on the streets in a lot of different areas. Today in the paper we read about the good news budget. $982 million more next year than this year. But at the same time, as we read the story, we see built into that budget 1% per year.
No, it's actually 2%.
2% for labor increases. We've got the head of the PBA saying they want 15%. I mean, is there any possibility that, with your statement that we're going to restore services, we're going to get the city back to where some people remember it once was, we may be headed back in the direction of unsound fiscal practices?
Not with me. I mean, over my dead body, will we ever engage in paying dollars that we don't take in or can't afford? And the fact that we're getting more dollars by way of revenue doesn't mean that that has to go to city employees. We have to be fair, we have to be responsible, we have to negotiate in good faith, and we will. But I asked the people in this city, and I'm talking now about the cops who are now on the city payroll. Would you rather have higher salaries or more cops? I think that most people, including the cops, and I'm just singling them out, I happen to have a very good rapport with them, and I like them, and I like Phil Caruso, and I like the cops. I think that everybody believes that we need more service, more cops, firefighters, teachers, sanitation people, and at the same time, a reasonable increase for those who are on the payroll. We have done this now for 3 collective bargaining agreements, 78 and 80 and 82. We have come through. We will come through again.
Okay, good. We have a gentleman with a question. Want to hustle on down to the microphone. Our audience today composed of people from all 5 boroughs. After this, if we have one on the line, we'll take a call from Queens. Hello, sir. What's your name?
Charles Wang, Executive Director of China Planning Council. How are you, Mr.
Hi, Charlie.
Mayor?
I know him.
Oh, good, good.
First, I want to commend you with the budget. I think certainly the element that you have put in are meeting lots of our needs in the community. And I also want to thank you for what you have done for Chinatown, your presence in many other areas. But today I want to quote one problem to your attention is within the budget is the youth board. As you know, we have the 18 billion plus, and the youth board budget is only 20 million.
The which budget?
Youth Bureau.
The Youth Board.
Bureau, right, Youth Board.
Yeah.
And we have 2 million children, teenagers in the city. So in that particular comparison, Youth Board budget is really very minuscule. So,
well, we will look at that so that everybody knows what we're talking about. We provide dollars to private organizations to provide services to youth, and it's a very small part of our budget. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on the children of this city, not only at the Board of Education, where they have a budget that exceeds $3 billion, but the Parks Department provides services for the youth. Foster care, Human Resources Administration provides services for the youth. Even our police department helps with PAL. So we will look at that in the budgetary process, but you know and I know that there is a lot more going to the youth of this city than the $2 million in that particular small pot.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I'll take a phone call in just 1 second. I want to go back to another one of the things. Now, I'll read this one. It's short from the book, again dealing with President Carter. One of the things I think people find fascinating about this is the musing of one public official about another. You say, and I was thinking, thinking about President Carter, if you had any real brains, you would come to my defense. Not that I need you to, but you would hold up my hand associating yourself with me. Instead, you walk away. Tell us that story.
That was really a traumatic situation. The president came to town in the 1980 election, President Carter, and I brought him to the hotel where there was a rally, and the rally was of some union workers. And in that particular case, we were involved with our hospital problem, and so there were some people who were angry with me. They shouldn't have been, but I understand it. But nevertheless, we are introduced, and Governor Carey's introduced, and Lieutenant Governor Mario Cuomo is introduced, and a couple of other people are introduced, and they're all cheered. And at that point, they introduced me. Oh, Senator Moynihan was there. And at that point, it was about 50-50 cheers and 50-50 boos. And the president is standing next to me. Now, you have to understand, he wants my support. So everybody's cheering these other people. He's applauding. Then when my name is mentioned and it's 50-50 cheers, 50-50 boos, instead of coming to help me, which is what I would do for him, he steps away from me. Wasn't that dumb?
So you're left there.
Right.
Right. So, but and as you go on to say in the book, you do the same thing there that you do sometimes at Yankee Stadium or Shea Stadium,
right.
Which is hold up your hands and pretend the boos.
I do. When you have to get accustomed to being booed. And you do. Now, you know that at a sports event, they boo you even if they like you. But there are other places where they boo you when they really want to boo you. And in my own head, I have decided that rather than let it adversely impact on my feelings. You know, if you're booed, everybody likes to be liked, and if you take it so seriously, it can depress you. So I've decided in my own head, if I'm going through a situation where I'm being booed, I will raise my hands up high and hold my thumbs up in a victory sign, and in my head, I turn those boos into cheers, and it does worlds for your feelings.
So we make him feel good? All right. Good. We'll be back right after
Thank
this.
you.
Okay, welcome back. Our guest, Mayor Edward I. Koch, mayor, author, human being. Now, let's go to the phones. First up, this is Bill Boggs on Midday. Hello.
Hello, I'm a resident of Queens. My name is Julie.
Yes, Julie.
Okay, my husband and I have supported Mayor Koch in the past, and we're really hoping that he can help us now. We live a half mile from the Clearview Expressway, the Throgs Neck Bridge, where the radioactive uranium is going through. I don't know what to do. I'm hoping that you can do something to stop it. We're beside ourselves because we have children, and we're right on top of the thing. I've called Brookhaven. They say everything's fine, the caskets are fine, or whatever they call them. And I don't know who's testing this out or what's going on. I hear it's going to happen in 3 weeks, and we're very, very upset.
Well, let me tell you what the facts are. We contested this in court, and we said that Brookhaven ought not to bring or transport these radioactive materials, no matter how well guarded, through the city of New York. The court said that we don't have the right to prevent them, and what we're now doing is working out a method whereby they will not go through populated areas, and they will be on the major roads. We're still going to ask Brookhaven not to exercise the authority that the court has given to it, but obviously I have to abide by the law. I'm hopeful that we will work it out in a way that there will be no danger. In the meanwhile, you should not worry about it. The fact is, there's not a thing you can do about it. The fact is, it is much bigger as an issue than you and your block because it relates to the whole country. We will do what we can. In the meanwhile, enjoy life.
All right. Thank you very much for that call. No more calls? Let's have this gentleman to the microphone. Here is a man from Brooklyn. I'm so happy we were able to get people from all 5 of our boroughs. Hi, sir. What's your name?
I'm Mr. Charles Joshua. I'm the Executive Director of the Central Brooklyn Coordinating Council.
Good to have you with us,
Yes,
sir. Thank you for coming.
And the mayor and I,
We know one
we know
another.
each other.
I know all the community people, and I know
Okay.
him. He's a very able man.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask you one question, Mayor. In reference to, are there any moves being made to revamp the educational system so it could better impact upon the minority youths? And then I'd just like to get some input.
Yes, I will.
That's an important question.
You know that about 71% of all the children in our public school system are either black or Hispanic. Our budget exceeds $3 billion, and we are seeking to make the school system more relevant so that in this new budget we have reduced the grade size in the first grade, and we hope to do that in other grades as well. Last year we put in full-day kindergarten. As it relates to the older children, we want to get them acquainted with computers, because you cannot get a good job unless you can read, write, and speak English well, and do math well, and to work a computer. We're upgrading the vocational schools. We're putting computers, new ones, into those schools. So we are going to do what we can to give the youth of this city the best possible education.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Someone said to me, how can Mayor Koch find time to write a book, promote a book? He's running the most complicated city in the world. He's making money off the book. Is there a conflict of interest?
Well, that's a very good question, and let me tell you that it's not unique for a public official to write a book. Governor Cuomo wrote a book. Senator Moynihan wrote a book. There are many people.
They're not as busy as you are.
But I happen to work anywhere from 12 to 14 hours a day, and I wrote the book on my own time. You know that on weekends. Do you know that the city employee who works for the city for 6 years gets 4 weeks vacation? I never take 4 weeks vacation. If I take 8 days vacation, it's a lot, maybe 2 weeks. That's number one. But let me tell you, Governor Cuomo said he wrote the book because he wanted to use the dollars to send his kids to school. I wrote the book because I want, and he said that kind of facetiously, but also seriously. I wrote the book because I wanted people to know about government, but I want to tell you what the benefit is to the city financially. We've added up what the city and the state make in taxes, sales tax, corporate tax, personal income tax, as a result of 200,000 copies being sold, of which only 100,000 would be sold in New York City. And do you know what the total comes to? $470,000 that the city and the state of New York get as a result of my having written that book. Would you say they're getting a lot for their money when they have me as mayor?
That's his answer. Okay. Good answer. Let's go back to our microphone here. We have a lovely young woman from?
Hi, I'm from Community Board 8 Manhattan.
Manhattan. Hi, what's your name?
Tricia Engel. Hi.
Welcome.
I was just curious if you have any plan, or if there are any plans in the works for rent control or rent stabilization for commercial spaces, making it easier for the smaller business person to make it.
I'll tell you, it's a very troublesome issue, and one that I have great sympathy for the individual, and yet I've come to the conclusion it would be harmful to the economy of the city of New York to impose commercial rent control. There's no other city in the country, with the exception of maybe 6 blocks in Berkeley, California, where they have commercial rent control. I believe it would cause disinvestment, that people would not build commercial buildings if they thought they were going to be under control. And then if you said, well, why not just provide the controls for the shopkeeper, the storekeeper who's now in possession, doesn't it give that person a competitive advantage over some new shopkeeper who has to rent a store or a premises at the current market rental rather than an arbitrary rental? So my conclusion is that while it's a very sympathetic situation, that there would be a greater downside for the city's economy if we were to have commercial rent control, even though there would be some people who would benefit by it.
Okay.
That's your answer. I think we have time for one quick phone call. Hi, this is Bill Boggs. You're on Midday. Hello.
Yeah, hi. My name is Ann. I'm a resident of Staten Island. I live in the Willowbrook area, walking distance to Seaview. I just wanted to tell the mayor, we have 4 registered voters in the House. We all voted for him last time, and unless he can do some things to preserve our middle-income area, in this neighborhood, he will not get any votes in this house.
I'm glad you posed it that way, because I say to you, you should definitely today decide to vote against me.
I for sure
and I
will.
want to tell you why. It has nothing to do with the issue. I have never, ever run my elections or races for re-election on the basis of, will I please someone or will I lose their vote by doing what's reasonable and responsible?
Can I
And
answer
so,
you?
let me finish.
Okay.
No. We happen to have a moral and legal obligation to provide shelter for those who are without a roof over their head. There are some people who go further, and I don't agree with them, that the city has an obligation to provide an apartment, a permanent apartment for everybody. We can't. We couldn't meet that morally or legally or financially. But to provide dormitories for those who are out in the cold, to provide 3 meals a day for the hungry, I will. And if I lose your 4 votes, so be it.
Can I answer you now, sir?
A quick follow-up. Go ahead.
Okay. What about the middle-income people who have put life savings into homes? How are we going to be protected from the released former prisoners of Rikers Island? These people are going to be free to walk around the neighborhood. There's no fences to keep
You're
them in.
confusing two things. Firstly, the people who are in the shelters overwhelmingly are not people from Rikers Island. Rikers Island is a former prison. I want to tell you that we provide security, and we have 18 of these shelters in the city of New York, and we do not decide to put them in poor neighborhoods. We put them in every neighborhood. Do you know that we have a shelter on Park Avenue at 67th Street? And the people there don't like it, but we're not going to move it. And we are going to be fair and equitable for all of the people in the city.
I thank you for that call. Had to take a pause. We'll be back and continue the program right after this break. We just saw a sign on the screen about Health Expo 84 locations all around the city. Give it a plug.
Well, there are 2 weeks. I think it's April 28th through May 12th.
Starts this Saturday.
Right. And what will happen will be that you'll be able to get expert medical advice and assistance in the streets of the city of New York. And Channel 5 is a big cooperator, and I'm very appreciative to them.
Good. Before we take our next question at the mic, one thing I wanted to ask is, I think whether you agree with it or not, well, let's see if you agree with it. Do you agree that there is a perception that you do not favor the problems of minority people?
Oh, sure, there is a perception, but they're wrong. And that's a perception held by some people, particularly activist black and white leaders who would like to replace me with one of themselves, and those who believe that there should be a black mayor, not on the basis that that individual happens to be better, but on the basis of his or her color. That's no way to elect somebody. If there are blacks, Hispanics, Asians, whites, Jews, Italians, whoever, run. But not on the basis of your race, your religion, or your sex. I'm willing to contest with people on the basis of ideas, on the basis of a record of achievement. And what they do is to engage in racism, some of those black and white leaders, by falsely accusing me of racism. And that's even worse than racism itself.
What plan or strategy do you have to try to change these perceptions?
Well, you know, when I tell people that we have more blacks and Hispanics in high levels of government than ever before, and equal to what the 3 predecessors had collectively, when I tell them that we have done about 20,000 rehabilitations of apartments in 1 year that go overwhelmingly to blacks and Hispanics, when Mayor Beam in his last year had only 1,700, they say we don't care. When I tell them we have the lowest rate of unemployment in the city of New York in 10 years, they don't care. That doesn't mean that things are good, but I want to tell you that this administration is absolutely against racism, against discrimination based on race, religion, or sex. I also want to tell you we're against racial quotas. Now, there are some black and white leaders who are for racial quotas. I think that is discrimination.
Okay. To the microphone. Hi, welcome. What's your
Hi.
name?
My name is Maria Ricardo, and I'm doing research on the West Side Urban Renewal Project
Yes.
here in New York City. And on the 8th of April, the New York Times reported that the former police headquarters at 240 Center Street is being sold for $4.4 million, and it's going to be converted to luxury apartments.
Yes,
and you
it
yourself
will be.
said that you and I won't be able to afford
That's
them.
correct.
Okay. What I'd like to know is why, since you mentioned earlier the thousands of homeless people in the city, why can't the city do something about using this for
I'm going to
people
explain why.
homeless?
You have a very good illustration. Over the next year, and that includes the prior 6 months, we will have rehabilitated 4,000 vacant apartments from our housing stock for people exclusively who are without shelter, the families that are now in emergency quarters. We also have to provide you with cops and firefighters and sanitation people. And you know who pays for that? It's not the people who are going to be occupying those 4,000 apartments. It will be middle class and rich people, mostly middle class, who also want to live and buy their apartments or rent their apartments and pay taxes. Now, if you said that every parcel of property that the city of New York owns, like the police precinct house that we're able to sell for $4 million, and then a private developer comes in and puts in, I don't know how many millions, probably much more than 10, I don't remember the amount, and then pays us taxes, that we shouldn't do that, this city would be in hopeless bankruptcy. There is a balancing of interest. How do you think we're going to pay for 1,000 more cops next year? Are we going to pay for it out of the rents that we get for the 4,000 apartments that we're giving poor people? No. Should we give those apartments to poor people? Yes. Should we also encourage middle-class people to stay in this town? Of course.
Can you let me know what's going to happen then with the $1 million surplus that's in Big Mac?
It's $1 billion. Yes, it was announced the other day. We're $160 million. But firstly, you have to understand, it is $1 billion payable to us over a 4-year period, not in any 1 year. And of the amount, $160 million at the rate of $40 million goes into our budget to pay for essential services like cops and firefighters and sanitation. $365 million goes for economic development, so we can get people to stay here and create new jobs so that people who don't have jobs will get jobs. And then we're going to have $100 million that will be used to be put in investments and create interest, and the interest will be used to subsidize new housing for moderate income people. What do we mean by moderate income people? People whose income annually for a family of 4 starts at $15,000. Is that a lot of money? Those people can't get housing today. It's too expensive. We're going to provide them with a little subsidy.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one more question we have time for? Yeah. Right to the mic, sir. What's your name?
My name is Don Bartley. I'm from Brooklyn. I work with Central Brooklyn Coordinating Council. I'm director for the youth employment. My question to you, Mr. Mayor, is concerning employment for the summer. Summer is just around the corner. I know you have at the present time the partnership program and the summer youth employment program. I'd like to know what else would possibly be available, some sort of campaign or something to sensitize more employers towards getting jobs for you.
Well, the summer job program constitutes a program of 7 weeks of work at minimum wage, and we hope to have about 60,000 youngsters so employed. We encourage people throughout the city who can hire a youngster at minimum wage to come into our program. And you should know, because we select the youngsters on the basis of random selection from a computer, that 92% or better are minority youth, black or Hispanic, whereas when they did it through patronage before I became the mayor under the prior administration, when they filed their statistics with the federal government, only 76% of those youths were minority.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Let's take a break and continue with our guest live on Friday right after this. by all too quickly. We're going to show you a clip of Sunday in New York, which won an Academy Award. First, two very quick personal questions.
Sure.
You mentioned vacation before. If you could take a real vacation, a lot of New Yorkers are hardworking, like you and me. Where's your fantasy vacation? 3 weeks away with nothing to worry about.
Well, I'll tell you, of all the
Carol
vacations...
Bellamy runs a store.
Well, any country that she's not in would be helpful. But I just said that jokingly.
It's a joke. I gave it a setup.
It was a setup.
Go ahead.
I like her. Now, the fact is, of all the countries I've ever been to, the one that I enjoyed the most, and I will go back, won't be next year, but I will go back, was Spain. I had the best time in terms of seeing things and eating, and of course the people. Now that doesn't mean that the other places weren't good, but that was unique.
The second personal question is, you seem so young, you seem so vital, you're in good shape, hoping for at least another 4 years. You always told me and everybody...
Why only 4?
Okay, that's the answer.
I want to be mayor forever.
Okay, got it. Now let me introduce you to a little piece of animation that I think is brilliant. It won an Academy Award. It is called Sunday in New York. We'll meet its creator in just a second, but watch this animation of Mayor Koch.
These vagabond shoes are basically longing to stray, excuse me, right through Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island, too. I want to wake up in a city that doesn't sleep. And of course find I'm king of the hill, top of the heap. These gridlock blues, for instance, are currently being investigated by a specially appointed commission of handpicked delegates sympathetic to the legislative parameters of the situation. In old New York.
Let's have a nice welcome for the creator of that Sunday in New York, Jimmy Picker. Nice to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
And you had a very impressive appearance on the Academy Awards with your bow tie spinning around and so forth. How did you have to go to Mayor Koch and get any kind of permission to do this, or tell us the history behind it?
No, I feel it's like doing a political cartoon.
You're right.
And I just made sure it was cute and beautiful, and so there was nothing that he could be disgruntled about.
Let me just say, even if I didn't like it, you don't have to ask my permission.
Who did the voice?
Wait to see the other version.
Who did
the voice was done by Scott Record, who's a stand-up comedian.
Actually, what is that? I mean, we say it's animation, but it's little figures.
It's plasticine figures.
Figures?
Yeah, oil-based clay with different colors in it. They're about 6 inches high, and I put them in the front of the camera, and I animate them frame by frame.
Good.
He's a genius.
Yeah. What was your first reaction? You've seen it.
I loved it. I've seen it now about 30 times, and each time I enjoy it, and that's the truth of the matter. But the first time I saw it was when someone said, there's a guy outside who's done a cartoon, he'd like you to look at it, and it's about you. And I thought to myself, oh, God. He said,
what is this, chopped liver?
You're right, you're right. But if it's helpful to the city of New York and to encourage artists and people to do things here, I'll do it. So I went out and I looked at it on the television screen, and I thought it was brilliant, and that's what I said at the time.
Yeah, absolutely was. What else have you done, Jimmy?
In 1978, I was nominated for a clay caricature of Jimmy Carter, singing Georgia on My Mind. That's with Ray Charles's voice. And other than that, I've done some commercials around town, children's shows.
Where does one get the training to be able to do something seemingly as unusual as this?
Well, I trained with a firm in Munich in '73 and '74. It was actually an American firm that got a big TV contract there. And there's much more of a tradition of puppet animation in Europe, so there was just more exposure.
Okay, and what's next, Jimmy?
Hopefully a longer film, possibly AKA Meshuggah. You never know who that may star.
Leave me out.
Have you, by the way, Jimmy, have you read Mayor Koch's book, Mayor, yet?
No, I haven't had a chance yet.
Well, what would you like to ask?
I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy.
What would you like to ask Mayor Koch? Here's an opportunity. I don't know how much time you spent.
What would I like to ask you? What kind of toothpaste do you use?
Actually, I use the machine, the toothpick machine. And no
healthy.
paste, but just a brush.
Right. They say paste really isn't that necessary.
Are we really talking about this now? We're really discussing toothpaste now. How about you, Jimmy? What do you use?
I use the baking soda and peroxide. They say it's
very healthy.
They say
we have one phone call let's go to the phones. This will be one of our, we're running short on time here on Friday afternoon. Bill Boggs here at midday. Hello.
Yeah, I'm a next-door neighbor of Mayor Koch. I live in a fraternity house across the street. And since you guys were talking about the homeless, as Mayor Koch probably knows, our area is the home of the homeless. And what's been bothering me a lot is we have a lot of police protection, but they concentrate more on bothering them than on cleaning them up. You've been living in the area a while, and I guess you've taken walks through the park, and I don't know if you've ever experienced seeing the policemen not trying to help the homeless by getting them into the homes that you've been talking about, the dormitories, but they've been bothering them, chasing them away, making them feel like they're less than human beings, and
I think you're being unfair. I believe, I think you're unfair. You may see it otherwise. I believe that cops do an overwhelmingly good job. There may be an occasional rogue cop who doesn't do his job professionally. We cannot compel people to go into our shelters. What we can do is to tell them that they're there. Our cops do tell them that there are 18 shelters and everybody is welcome to come in who needs shelter. But we're not allowed under the law to drag them to a shelter.
Thank you very much for that call. We have someone at the mic. We do not have time for your question. We are just about out of time. I want to indicate, Frank, I really enjoyed your book very much. It is obviously a big hit, and I think definitely think you'd enjoy reading it. One last thing. What are you doing this weekend?
This weekend I'm going to be in town. I'll probably go to the movies and to a Chinese restaurant.
What do you want to see? What movie?
I haven't really decided yet, although there's one on the Spanish Civil War that got very good reviews, and I may go to see that one.
If you want something light, try Racing with the Moon.
Is it good?
Very.
Yeah?
I really enjoyed it. I want to thank everybody for watching. Hope you have a very healthy, beautiful spring weekend. Jimmy, thank you for being here. Good luck. And Mr. Mayor, always good to see you.
Thank you.
Have a nice time, and we'll see you Monday back on Midday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.